Good evening. Go ahead and get this started. Just doing some testing today with some NPCs. I've put together a few extra things, added a couple things to my to-do list. It's not much, it's pretty much the same as it was before, but there's some stuff that I want to try to do with NPCs. I haven't put in my list here. Fix NPC ship sight cone. I'm attempting to, this is the first time I've ever really tried much with NPCs or enemies or just non-player ships. I've made a template for them. The player has its own template, but so does the NPC ship in the actor templates window. I've got my sound on. Yeah, I got my sound on. And then you got all these little conditions. I'm just experimenting right now. The main condition contains all the movement. This is messy as heck because a lot of it's stuff that it's using the exact same movement that the player ship is using. The player controls are not located here. Normally in the input triggers you have an up, down, left, right, etc. I have an up button here, but it's mostly just storing a bunch of scripts. It has a little trigger that I use sometimes to reset a variable, but right now it's not linked to anything other than that. It just sets a variable to 0. All of the movement, I'm going the wrong place, all of the movement for the player is stored inside a timer right here, which only runs if the actual input or the input method of mode spaceflight is turned on. That's kind of when I switch between the controls or the input sets. There's a menu input set that lets you move around menus, and then there's a spaceflight input set. And all the movement's stored in this big web here. It's nice and clean. There's some comments. This is turning scripts down here. These are timer-based scripts. Anything that's based on recharging, like energy recharging, or based on timers. Some drag values that reset things to 0. And all the movement is up here. So the drag physics, and then where the controls, the player holds up, and it does some checks to make sure they're not holding the boost button down, in which case it'll use up some energy from the ship's energy pool. And then there's a max speed value that it caps everything so you can't go over the maximum thruster speed. And then there's some stuff here that makes sure that doesn't happen. So a lot of it's just contained in that one script. I might move the left and right controls back here, because I did discover there's usually some behavior where a control will override another, and if I have the left and right controls inside the player, that's not the player. There's one issue that I'm not super happy with, but if you come look up here, there's left and right, and these will turn the ship left or right, and you'll see these two conditions here. The problem is that if you push left, it doesn't matter if you're holding right, left will always override a right turn. So you could be turning to the right and then you press the left key, the ship will stop turning right and start rotating the other way. And if you're rotating left and you press the right key, it'll always just keep turning left. So that's something that I discovered. If I keep them in the controls and the input triggers, left and right can override each other, and if they're on the player timer they can't. So that I might move those back. But the way that the NPC ship works is very similar. It's using all the same movement. It's got all the same code. There's just some extra stuff in here to determine whether it's moving left or right. I've actually left the old conditions from the player controls in here. Kind of helps me keep track of where things were. This is the up. I'm going to change a lot of commenting. This is the up movement, and these are the left and right movements. This is the boost control and up and boost. And then this stuff down here is not super important. This was camera and parallax stuff for moving the camera in the background. So mostly the same as the player's script. The difference is in here, instead of controls, it's not checking for left and right controls. It's checking, I have a series of values. I might actually have to go into there it is. I made a file full of the flags that I'm using. I call them flags. I assume they're probably called flags. But it's mostly just binary 1s and 0 values. So these are the different states. There's probably going to be more. This is what I've come up with so far. These are the different states that I want my AI or NPC ships to be able to choose between. The idle pose, where it's not doing anything, it's just sitting there. Moving, that's basically when it's thrusting forward. Boosting, boosting is obviously when it's using the boost. I haven't implemented boosting yet, but I will. Attacking, if it's currently near an enemy, it sees its enemy and the enemy's in range and all that, it'll try and attack it. Patrol is something I'm going to try and set up where it will kind of fly around randomly or pick or set waypoints and then fly to the waypoints and just kind of zoom around. Proximity. This will be whenever anything is in proximity, within a range, a certain detection range of the ship. I believe there's going to be another one to detect, because I think I need to keep track of multiple targets. I've never done AI. I don't know enough about it to know how much I'm going to need, but I do know that it's going to be complex. I know it's complicated, annoying, tedious. For now, I know I've got a proximity flag to tell the ship or tell the AI that something is within range of it, and that's usually going to be the ship target. The target, these are different values. These are the AI related flags, states. They're usually a 0 or 1. And then these down here, this one's a 0 or 1 too, but it's usually these are storing a different type of value, like a number or the ID of a ship. Like the ship target value is going to tell this ship which one it's targeting, or the NPC which one it's targeting, which one it's looking at, if somebody shot at it. And then there's going to be another value, I believe, for enemy proximity or enemy, because it should have a good target and a bad target, I think. So if it's got a good target like a space station that it's flying to, I don't really think I want an enemy to override its initial targeting ability. And once it's done with combat, it might want to resume, go back to the space station. I might have to move variables around, store information in different places, but I'll figure that out. And then there's all these values down here, or I didn't even cover turning directions. The turning direction is basically just 3 values to tell this ship if it's going to turn left, right, or stop. And so left is -1, 0 is to stop, and +1 is to turn to the right. I believe that's kind of the way the turning system works in 001 as well. There's a built-in, I can't even, there we go. There's a built-in system turning that won't work with the way that I've set things up in my game because I'm using custom physics and stuff, but if you set this to turn an actor, it will just rotate it in a direction. It'll rotate it to the right, or it'll rotate to the left, or stop in the center here. But it functions the same. All I'm doing is setting a value to -1, 1, or 0. And if this value, turning direction, is set to -1, it's acting as if it's pressing the left key. And if it's set to 1, it'll act as if it's pressing the right key. So it'll turn to the right, turn to the left. And those are controlled by this Cyclone custom event that I've made, which after lots and lots and lots of trial and error, I tried a whole bunch of different things. I even tried making text-based scripts. I tried doing comparisons. I tried all kinds of stuff. Finally settled on this super, super stupid simple script here. I don't know why I didn't think of it at first, because originally I was doing all this convoluted stuff. I was taking the difference between the direction from the NPC to the player minus the, I don't even know what that is, direction angle of the ship or the NPC. And then I did all this stuff, check if the angle is less than 0, add 360, normalize it, do all this stuff, check if the absolute value is less than the sight cone angle, do this other distance check. Don't have to do any of that. I'm an idiot. I don't know why I did it. All I have to do is check to see if this value here, which we can see if I move this out of the way, basically I'm converting everything to degrees here. You can see the geometry.degrees because every one of these values is in radians, which is the highest is 3.14. It's measured in a value of pi. I don't know nothing about math, so I'm not really sure about all of the math behind it, but using some built-in functions here, all I wanted to do is find the direction between this actor, which is this NPC ship, and its target, and that's why it says actor this variable ship target. All it's doing is taking the X and Y position of the NPC ship, grabbing the X and Y position of its target, which in this case I guess is the player. It could be anything, and that will give it an angle, and that angle could be anything between 0 and I think it's between negative 180 and 180. So it's already normalized as far as I know. This value, there's no other operation needed. I think it goes between negative 180 and 180. I'm pretty sure. So basically it's just checking that, and the minimum and maximum values here, these are slightly more complicated sounding, but each NPC ship has a variable to store its sight angle. I guess that's kind of like its line of sight, the angle that the player or target has to be within. And I can do silly little drawings with paint. Basically it's just a little cone like this. I don't even have to do the curve, but I can. There's a little curve for where the player can be outside of, and the ship's over here pretty much. We have our spaceship. That's not a good spaceship. Here's our spaceship. It's a rectangle, and in front of it it has a little cone projected out, and all it's doing basically, at all times there's a line going straight out from it. It's not actually there. This is imaginary. The angle that this ship is facing is called the direction angle, so it's always got this line pointed at no matter what direction it's facing. So if the ship's facing at an angle like that, the line's coming out this way pointing upwards. Won't get rid of those, but all it's doing really is taking the direction angle value, which is the central line, and that's basically just actor this dot direction angle. And you can do that, or you can go through the menus here. I believe it's under geometry. It's not geometry, it's rotation Y or rotation Z. Yeah, rotation Z. But basically it's finding a maximum and minimum value by taking the sight angle, dividing it in half, which in this case, if I go down here, my sight angle is currently set to 30. So that divided by 1/2 is 15. So all it's doing to get the left edge of this cone, this one right here, it's taking this direction angle value and subtracting 15, which gives us this angle here. And then the maximum is just adding 15, or adding half of the total angle to the bottom half, and we get this second edge. So the second edge is our maximum value. So if the player's ever, or the target's ever outside this range out here in the void, this cone right here is where this ship's able to see you. So as long as the player or the target's within these two values, the sight angle divided by 2, it'll turn on that the ship is able to see the player and activate the flag inside the ship, which will go all the way back over here into the NPC, into the base, which affects these two, I guess, triggers, win triggers. And when you put a condition here, all it's looking for is a 1 or a 0, and that's all this sight cone custom event does, is it returns a 1 or a 0. So once the player or target is inside that cone, once the player is inside this cone, it'll return a 1, which will trigger this, which will cause the ship to stop turning. The player can be seen. I have it fire a log message so I can tell when the ship sees the player. There's also the second part. Whenever that is a 0, whenever the player is outside the sight cone, it has to figure out where the player is and determine how to turn towards it. So it's very simple. I have to use geometry.degrees on all of these values because they're all in radians, so I have to turn them into degrees. But I want to get the NPC's direction angle, which in 001 is rotation Z. I'm not sure what rotation Y is, direction angle Y, but you just want direction angle. That's the direction it's pointing. And then that's you subtract the direction to the actor that you're targeting. So that's going to be down here in geometry, not text, geometry. There are multiple values for this. Direction between points gives you the option to pick an X and Y to start with. So we'll say actor this dot X, oops, forgot the R, and actor this dot Y. Then over here, let's say we'll just use the main player, the main player controlled actor in the game would be actor main dot X, actor main dot Y, and press enter. Basically all that's going to do is geometry direction. Geometry.direction, which is at the beginning of this. There we go. So all that's doing is back into paint. Let's say, where are my shapes? Oh, because I squished the window, I lost all my shapes. Let's say the NPC is here and the player is over here. What this geometry.direction is doing is it's finding the angle from the center of this ship to the center of its target, or the center of the player in this case. So basically it's going to send out and try and see where the player is. Now the thing about this cone is it's actually coming from the center, not from the front. So I don't know why I drew the box over there, but let's say that this is the center right here and the player is down here. So the geometry distance, or yeah, the geometry direction, not distance, is actually checking this direction, the direction that the player or the target is from this ship. So it's going to get this angle. We want it in degrees, which is why I keep using geometry.degrees here. And to get to that, you can actually just type degrees. Degrees from radians, radians from degrees. But you want the one that says degrees from radians. It'll convert that tiny value from 3.14 or whatever to degrees, which is between 0 and 180. Might be there's 360 because it's negative 180 to 180, but I'll cancel out of that so I don't save any of my changes. All I want to do is check to see that it's greater than or less than 0, because it's either going to be 0 to 180 or 0 to negative 180, and if it's between 0 and negative, it's actually going to be it's going to want that's going to have you turn to the right, and if it's greater than 0, it's going to be 0 to 180, and that'll make the ship turn to the left. And so that's really all I had for that. I want to take a look and see how that works. So it's got a little tiny sight range, which I set up here in the variables. I made a variable called AI sight angle, and that's 30-degree angle in front of it, which is basically what I've drawn here, 30-degree angle or so. And whenever it's rotating or pointing towards the player's ship, it'll try and turn towards the player until it's generally facing the player, because the player can be within this range. It's not trying to line it up directly with the exact center. It's given a bit of leeway, so it might point directly at the player, it might not point directly at it, but it'll try. You see it here swinging. It's not pointed directly at it, but the player's inside its field of vision, because its field of vision extends out beyond its sides. It's also not targeting me, so it's going to try and rotate towards me now that I'm inside its sight range, which should be from about here to here. And the ship's crossing it. As soon as it crosses it, it says down here, or it's really hard to get out of it. Player can't be seen. So now it's trying to turn the other way to spot him. Sometimes it does that. It'll flip all the way around instead when I don't really want it to, but it's going to do its best to try and just point at the player if it's inside the cone. And it's using the turning speed of its built-in or of its equipped thrusters, so it can't rotate faster. It doesn't do instantaneous rotation. There are some cases I'm going to have to figure out how to make it not do that, because if the player moves above it, its angle becomes, I think it's if it's left or right, but if it's left or right, I can actually pull up the direction to the player is currently a negative angle. As the player moves around, that angle changes, 72, 66, 53, 42, 20, now it's 2 degrees, 25, 30. So it goes in a full circle all the way up until it gets to 180. And once it's at 180 over here, it flip-flops to negative 180, which isn't exactly what I want it to do, because, I mean, it is the correct behavior. That's exactly how it's supposed to work, but it decides to try and turn the other direction to get to it, because I've told it that if the value is less than 0 to rotate this way, and as we can see, negative 152 is less than 0, and if it's greater than 0, it'll rotate to the right. So that's one little buggy I'm going to have to figure out. It's kind of, I think it does the same thing on the other side, because moving up, maybe it doesn't. Oh, that's kind of nice. So it's negative, 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 positive. Look at all those logs. But yeah, for the most part, it'll try to keep the player within its sight, its range of sight. It'll even do a whole flippy thing. I'll figure that out eventually. There's also a flag for movement state, so if I turn on the movement, it'll start flying around. And sometimes it bumps into the player, but it'll always try to point at the player, and you can shoot at him, you can bump him around. He'll try and go towards the player. I'm going to have to add some behaviors for him to slow down or try and avoid hitting the player, or even orbiting the player instead of flying straight towards him. Because I've never done AI's or enemy behavior, but all I really want it to do is feel like it's flying around with the same equipment, the same kind of restrictions that the player is. And you can shoot him, he'll get damaged. There's little damage numbers that come with 001. I might make my own, I might use those. So now it's going to try and flip-flop because I'm above it. So there might be some weird behavior that I have to nail out like that. Depending on where I am in relation to the ship, sometimes it flip-flops itself. I might have an idea, because I want it to base not on like a global angle that it's positioned to. I think I want like its direction angle has to be rotating with it. I don't know. I actually don't know what I'm talking about, but it feels like it's checking this value that it can't be checking, or since it's like whenever the player hits negative 180, it flip-flops to positive 180 as soon as it gets down there. So let's see. It'll fly around, turn around, try and point at me a lot. It's going to bump me. I put in some collision, ricochet, physics. What I need to do as well is if it gets closer, I need to get it to rotate and fly away from the player so it gets kind of farther. And I have some plans on how I'm going to do that. There's going to be a retreat option. That's kind of good how it does that flip, because it'll move away if it's thrusting. Whenever it turns around like that, it'll fly away. It feels more alive than anything I've gotten set up before. And it doesn't really feel alive, but there's no explosion when you kill it, so he's just dead. He's just dead. So there's one. I could probably test it out with a couple of these guys, and really I want to get rid of that log message. Oops. No. I did not mean to do that. I don't think I wanted it to have a default 45-degree sight angle. I also don't want it to be like that. Default actor, well, I guess we'll start it like that. I can set them up to have their own here. These ones are set to be 30. I'll just stick a couple of these around. So right now, they're barely set up to interact with each other. I think there's they all have a collision thing. If they bump into each other, they'll bounce off each other, and they'll acquire a new target. So whenever something bumps into them, it switches the target or the ship they're targeting. And we'll see exactly what happens. They'll all come flying in towards the center if I turn on their movements, not cheats, objects. Let's go ahead, set all their movement values to 1. It's at the top. AI moving 1. I guess I could have done this before I copy-pasted everything, but I didn't, so I have to do it like this. So we'll change it in the debugger. Everything will be set to 1. Come back here and they'll all start flying around. None of them are targeting me. Which is what I want them to be doing. They're not targeting each other either. I've lost 2 of them. They're going to fly off the screen. But now if these guys were trying to attack me, I'd probably be getting my butt whooped, because they'd all be doing a pretty decent job. The accuracy of the weapons in this game, I believe, are set to be 100% accurate at the moment. Look at them just flip-flopping around when they crisscross each other. Boop. Boop. And eventually, I'm not really sure. I don't believe I can make it work correctly with I want bounce back. Like when you shoot them with weapons, I'd like them to bounce back just a little bit from the weapon impact, but there's no way to track. 001 uses this built-in projectile system for its weapons, and there's no way to keep track of the angle or the direction of the projectiles themselves. So I have to come up with some way to, I don't know, whichever way the player is facing has to be stored at the moment that the weapon is fired, so it can tell you whether the weapon's moving at an angle or what angle the weapon's moving at, in order to provide the feedback that I'd want, because you want the object to bounce in the direction, like if the player's moving southwest, you want the thing to bounce off that way. So I don't know, there's some ideas I have bouncing around in my head for projectiles like that, but these guys will just keep flying around. As they bounce into each other, their targets are switching, so these two are targeting each other. This one up here is targeting me, so he'll fly towards me. But if I go bump into one of them, they'll start targeting me again. Or if I shoot them. So now he'll start targeting me. And if I can get to that guy. Can't reach you. Boop. Now he's targeting me. So they'll target me until they crash into each other. And as soon as they bump into each other, they start targeting themselves. But I'll have to figure out how to fix this rotate 180 degrees. They're stuck rotating all the way around sometimes if their target is either below or above them, which is weird. I've got some friends I can poke for math help or math assistance, but ultimately that's the one big issue I'm having at the moment. So I'm going to add that to my to-do list. Fix NPC ship turning so it doesn't rotate 360 degrees to turn towards player. So that's one weird issue I'll have to, I don't know, really have to think on that one, because it's not very obvious to me what I have to do. This was my old turn decision script. It would check to see what the angle to the player was, subtract it from the current direction angle, and it was doing the same thing, checking if it's higher or less than 180, and in my case I'm checking if it's higher or less than 0. So there's some things I might have to change, check to see if it's higher or less than 180, or I might have to figure out how to add a value to the current direction angle of the NPC ship and then add I don't know what I'm talking about. So the NPC ship's movement, all covered. There's an attack trigger here. All it does is switch the target, the ship's target, and it tells it that it's got an enemy in proximity, which is another variable that I put in here. Enemy proximity will determine whether the ship is within range of somebody who's on a different team. And the teams that are built into 001, they're very basic. I don't know, there's not a lot that you can do to customize it. But the teams determine who's friendly with who, and you have several options. The good team, which by default, anybody on the good team is +1. They're good with each other. Anything that's -1 is bad to the good team. Anybody who's 0 is just neutral. So there's neutral all across the board here. They're friendly with everybody. They don't care. The bad team is not happy with the good guys, but they are happy with other bad guys. And the neutral team is just neutral, period. Neutral all around. And you can't do much with these. You can right click, you can left click, but you can't customize or anything. You can add more groups. You can have different bad groups that hate everybody. You can have a group that's not friendly with anyone or a group that's friendly with everybody. That's really it. So you can change the names, good, bad, neutral. You could change them to whatever you want. The rest of the default ones are bad group, bad group, bad group. And the way those work is pretty much anything on the same team will not collide with anything else on the same team. Things from different teams, good and bad, bad and good, will collide with each other. And neutral. Neutral is kind of like there's no feature attached, so it's kind of like being good. I don't really know how it affects the collision other than if I set everything to neutral, you can fly through anything anyway because I haven't set up anything. Let me see. Because if this guy's set to good, I should be able to fly through him. But if he's not set to good, he's considered solid. So I can already shoot him. That'll make me his target. And if he's neutral, I can still hit him. But let's go back in here and set him to good. So now that both the player and the ship are good, oh my gosh. Boop. Oh, I think it's because I have a collision script on. There is a collision script that activates. Normally, nothing happens if two good guys bump into each other. But the reason mine are repelling each other is I have a custom event here that the collisions are still detected. Like if they're overlapping, it'll still fire that it's colliding with something. But since I've got this collide script in here, it'll actually propel the player back whenever it hits it. So we'll just forget about that. It's not super important. But I want all these guys to be set to neutral for the most part. And you can, I believe, let's say I add a trigger just to bring up my script editor, but you can change things about the teams. So if, this ship is a good guy and you shoot at him enough, you probably want him to get angry, so you swap him over from the good team to the bad team, and suddenly you found yourself an enemy, or you've got yourself a new friend to run and pillage the universe with. So you can be a pirate in this game too, I'm hoping. I'd like to set it up so you can also become allied with the bad guys. That might be tricky. The scope of the games that I have in mind is bigger than I initially thought when I was starting out 8 years ago. But, I think I can do the majority. At the very least, I can get a little universe to explore and little ships to shoot at. And for my very first game development project ever, or serious one, I'd done some practices, small projects in the past that were like, dinky little demos. And no one's ever really up this late. My first night on, I got a whole pile of followers. Not even a pile. I got a couple followers, a couple views, and it's been quiet ever since. So it might have just been my initial crew of people checking in to see what I'm streaming. It might have been strangers from around the world checking in, and who knows? It would be fun to have some people to talk to while I do this. But let's see. So one of the changes I made is I set up a actor template for the player ship. I have noticed that when I'm using the templates, the actor templates, I have a base actor set up and a default actor, and I've actually gone through several times and tried all of these, the equipment line. Normally when you're creating a new actor on the map from an actor template, I have this base NPC ship base template is equipped with a couple things, like it's got a basic thruster, basic turning thruster, and basic beam weapon. And whenever you place one of those on the map, I'll create a new guy, oh my gosh, I can't click today. Create a new NPC. You can see that they're all equipped there. I did discover that it didn't work if I used it for the player template. So I tried equipping, I put a beam on and everything, put all the weapons or the equipment. And here in players and party members, this little editor here, this is where you set up the actual group that the player is controlling. You can control everything from how they level up, what experience they get, and all that. And this goes all the way up to level 99. But you can add magic whenever they level up. You can change the statistics using these cool little graphs. But whenever I set it up as a player template, I did discover that it doesn't seem to give the player the equipment from the template. So when I start the game, I got all kinds of errors because I was trying to check player equipment, and the player equipment was not on the player apparently. So I discovered I did have to include, I think I put it in the start game button, but there's oh no, it's in the system triggers. In the very beginning of the game, just to get through a few things, I've equipped several basic items on the player, because without those there's some checks and conditions that seem to require the player to have them right out of the gate, have equipment on, and apparently they don't pass through when you use an actor template on the main character. So it works in every other case, just not on the main character. That might be a bug, that might not be. Might be intentional. But that guy doesn't know where to point, so I'll shoot him. Now he knows to look at me, so he's going to try and look at me. And once I have an attacking script in there, he's going to try and attack, and he'll point and attack and shoot. And you can see that he's pointing right past me, so it won't be very accurate. I'm trying to make it so that the NPC ships aren't 100% accurate. Like, he'll be pointing at me, he'll shoot past me right here, and I can probably shoot at him a few times. I'll fly around, he'll do some moves. As long as I'm in his cone of sight, he'll probably try and attack me. And that's all I'm hoping, is give this basic AI behavior, so it's kind of fun flying around shooting ships. And it's a big map. The maps are big, so there's a lot of room to fly around. I'm out of thrusters, and God, I wish my particle trails would work. It's just not the same not having rocket trails behind the ship. So it seems like he'll follow me around. Sometimes he'll do one of those weird 180 spins and like that. I'll go wee. I have to figure out some extra math to fix that, because that's not what I want him to do at all. I don't want him to flip around. Okay. Meanwhile, got that log message that's just firing over and over. And those are in the sight cone triggers that I've got set up here. I'll just disconnect that for now. And the player ship, I've moved everything over here from the player. These are part of the parent template. You can't edit these. And it's really hard to see. There's a line where the gray is extra dark here. And these ones are not extra dark. So you can edit the ones that are in the default, or the base actor. Anything that's in base actor can't be touched from the default actor section. I think I went over this already, but the default actor is the one that gets placed on the map. Base actor is where you could store all your triggers and stuff. So I've got the player set to be good. He's set up with all of his triggers. The collided with actor, it's really just this custom event that bounces the ship. And then there's turn dampening. This basically keeps the ship spinning, adds inertial dampening wherever whatever direction the ship is spinning in. When he lets go of the mouse, or lets go of the button, it'll just keep making that spin value smaller and smaller. And then there's the controls. And here's a little piece that detects whether the player has left the map or not. And that's something I think I showed in one of my other videos that got messed up. So that was an interesting feature. Let me cover that one actually, because I didn't get to redo it. So somebody asked me about the way that I'm handling the map edges, and 001 can't do essentially you can't make an infinite map. There's an edge, there's a top edge, there's a corner, you know, you see all kinds of moving pieces here. I don't know how clear that is on the stream, but there's a butt ton of star layers here that just simulate this depth. We're really happy with that. I'm going to add another one or two, I think. But yeah, the way that the maps work in 001 is that they have edges, and if you go into the properties, you can see those edges have boundaries and connections in this bottom corner. And the way those work is these little buttons or checkboxes, radio ticks, they determine where the collisions are on the edges. So if you uncheck these, it essentially removes the collision at the edge of the screen, so the player can fly right past that. And you can also pick a map that when the player reaches an edge, like if the player reached the right edge, you could tell it to have a right connection to a different map, and it would teleport to the other map. You don't have to do it like that, and I believe it's automatic. It'll put it in the same position. So if you cross right here on this map, it'll put it on the left edge right here on the new map. And same if you cross right here, it'll put you on the new map right here. But the way I've got it set up is I removed all the boundaries from the edge. My map's about 300 by 300, and that's basically 300 tiles, not 300 pixels. And each tile in 001 is 32 pixels, so that's 300 tiles that are at 32 pixels times 300. That's 9,600 pixels squared in this map. So right at the center point is the star. The star is located right in the middle at 4,800, and I could make the map any size bigger, any size smaller. Doesn't matter. 300 is the size I went with because it's kind of decent enough to fit all of these planets. Still have a good gap before you get to the edge anywhere. You know, once you get to the top edge, you can still fly to the copper planet here. But once you get to the edge of the map, there is a trigger that will tell the player that you've reached the edge of the map. There's another one that will fire that when you come back into the map, it'll change some stuff. But I'm currently just using those triggers, the entered and left map triggers, to turn on and off these mini-map icons for the ships. Don't have anything spawning for ships quite yet. You can see this little white dot here where the ship is, but the player just appeared. I have to fix that. To-do list. Fix player minimap dot not showing up until controls are pressed. So the minimap dot for the player begins kind of hidden off the map, and then once the player starts moving, then it starts to adjust where the minimap dot is, or the indicator. So here you can see our little blue dot getting closer to the edge of the screen. And as it crosses the screen, or crosses the edge of the map, we have entered the void. Now you can still see the dot floating around off the map because I have some stuff that I need to fix. Basically, it's supposed to turn that off whenever you cross the edge of the map. It does not yet. It works with NPC ships. When the NPC ship flies off the map, it'll turn off this little icon up here, but I haven't figured out a few things. Anytime this updates, anytime the minimap is updated, sometimes the dots will reappear and you'll see them. So I got to clamp the position of the dots so that they stay within the range of this minimap area. So that's another thing on my to-do list. I've mostly gotten the station and planet docking screens working and looking pretty nice. You go and dock at a station. It's got a cool little fade in on the screen. You go to all the little sections of the space station. And then when you land on the planets, or not land, when you orbit the planets, you get this cool docking orbit animation, and the screen shows the planet. I'd like to add sound effects to the scan animation, the scanimation.
Plant life detected.
Got our detection yields working, our yield meters. Mostly I've just been messing with the AI stuff. Most of the day has been trying to get it to look at my ship as I move left and right, make decisions to turn towards the ship. That keeps it in this little cone that's kind of extended out from the front. So the player's within the cone right now. If I go a little bit further to the right, it'll try and adjust it so that the player stays within the cone. And I'm probably going to add a few more things to the movement, because I would like it to adjust bit by bit. And then there's some ships that I want to fix up the turning system so that they'll rotate different ways. They'll actually do loop-de-loops. Like the way that this ship is doing that 360 spin, that is something I want some of the ships to do, just as a behavior. They will just spin around, loop around, or fly behind you. That's something I don't really know how to do yet. Adding tricks, acrobatics, different kinds of behaviors to these ships. I want to know if there's a way that I can have different types of, combat ships. Some that instantaneously move around, some that, I don't know. I'll figure that out as I go. They're going to add more variety to the game. And my frame rate's kind of choppy with one of these guys out. Not even choppy. It's 150 because I'm streaming, but now it's 170 or 160, 170 because I killed that ship. And there's some frame rate drops here and there. There shouldn't be many. It shouldn't be too bad with NPCs on screen because I've kept their timers pretty low. But there are values that are getting checked every second all over the place that I need to fix a bit. But 120 is still double the max frame rate that I've got set up, so it's actually pretty good, I would say. So that's the part I've been working on all day, this angle to the player, just to determine how to turn towards the player. I've got a couple other scripts here that are for rotating towards objects or away from objects. Like this one finds an angle to a target pretty much, and direction point. I don't know if I'm doing some of these right. I might have to use direction point on the NPC, and then in a lot of cases I'm checking things based on radians instead of degrees, which I would like to check degrees instead, but radians are good for turn rate because it's a small number and you only want to add a small number to turning. I'll explain this one on another date, but the AI behaviors are almost the same as the players. It does have its own collision to check whether the player's bumped into it, and then it has a check to turn off its minimap indicator whenever it crosses the minimap boundary or the main map boundary. I have not managed to refine it so that it just stops it from moving at all. I need to add a condition into, I believe, this one. This is the one that positions its minimap dot. So it'll position the minimap indicator whenever this ship is alive. I'm going to have to add more checks it's gonna need a check to make sure that it's not dead, and in this case it's checking just to see that it exists on the map. If it's set to non-existent, it won't actually do anything at all. And that's when the ship is invisible or whatever. So really that's it. That's all I've done today. That's all the fancy stuff I've figured out, but you don't even know how much trial and error there was that went into getting just these two pieces working. Just these little bits making a sight cone. And I've been testing manual variables, like looking at log messages and everything, just one at a time, pressing controls. So that's all I think I was going to do for AI tonight. I want to add at some point conditions for checking if the player is considered an enemy, or if once the player shoots the ship enough times, it's going to flag the player as an enemy and then start attacking. So I can include a use weapon or start use weapon, and direction means it'll point it in this direction when I want it to shoot it towards the player. And I've got that value, I think it's in the sight cone. Oh wait, no, it's right there. I just want this value, the second half of this comparison here, to be here. No, this one. The direction it's going to shoot it in is going to be towards the player. And you can make it perfect accuracy or regular accuracy, which are set up in the items and magic editor. And the way that works is you give it an accuracy rating, which right here is at 98%, has 98% accuracy. You can turn that down and it'll kind of fire slightly off target. I think it's a percentage of deviation. I'm not sure. It deviates the angle that the weapon is firing from, so it's slightly varied every time you fire it. And you can't really see it from here, but let's boop, boop. I don't know why it's shooting straight up. Couldn't tell you. I think it's I really actually don't know. So instead of doing that, we'll just have it start using its weapon, which will fire it in the direction it's facing. And if it's not, we want it to stop. So this is just temporary. I just want to see how it looks when it's trying to shoot the player with a weapon. Well, pop it, give me so it stops whenever you're not in its line of sight. Let's turn on movement. Now it'll fly around and shoot. It's not very good at it. kind of want to give them all 10s, but very difficult. I don't even know if you can get rid of these. But I only want 10s. It's not super important right now, but at least give the player ship some HP. I don't know why the projectile's not hitting the player exactly. Pew! Fly into it. That's going right through me for some reason. But it hits perfectly when it's shooting at the enemy. So let me check my projectile, which is somewhere. There we are. And it's got a little collision. I'll just stretch it up a bit. It might be going through the player. The player's collision is kind of weird because I imported it from an old project. And if you look at it from the side, it's very small and not at all the size I want. So we'll put that at 0. I'll make that 16. I want this to be around the ship. And we want it to be a little bit taller, so. Now, I don't know if that was the problem. Usually is something with the collision boxes. Not always, but usually. So I'll shoot him, make me the target. There we go. Now we're getting hit. So it was a collision issue, and he'll shoot us a couple times. We'll get hit. He's gonna keep trying. He's probably gonna kill me. I don't even know if I can die. Yep. So he can kill the player. He can shoot. And there's just a little bit of weirdness because I'm going to want that attack to go towards the player, but it's very difficult because the ship, the NPC has a cone, so it'll stop rotating towards the player. But since it's going to be moving around, it's going to be less apparent. Whenever it stops to rotate to point at the player, it kind of stops when the player first enters the cone. So the player could be off to the side while the ship is shooting. So it's a little bit funky. I want to go ahead and put in the bullet point right at the tip. So that bullet fires from the front. We'll look at the side. So it should. If you don't have a bullet point, projectiles will default and fire from the center of your actors. Which isn't always ideal, but let's shoot him. Now you can see the point. The bullet sort of generates there at the front. Cool. I think I'll add another check in there at some point for a smaller angle to check that the player is in. Because it's going to have to check to see if the player is within an attack cone as well as a sight cone. So it can see the player, know that, or see the target, know that it needs to adjust a little bit just so it can shoot at the player directly. And that I'm not sure how I'm going to do just yet, but it's probably going to be just a smaller version of the sight cone. Sight cone's currently 30 degrees, I believe. I've got all that stored in this variable here. Yes, 30 degrees. So half of that's 15. So I'll probably do something like checking whether it's within a 15 degree angle. Because you don't want the enemy shouldn't start firing as soon as it can see the player, but it should be firing if the player's within this thinner range in the front of it, because it starts firing when the player's over here or over here. Well, the player should be directly in front, so it does fire a little bit of extra projectiles that it probably doesn't need to. I'll have to fix that as well. So let's add that to the to-do list. Alright, so all I'm doing is adding more to my to-do list rather than finishing pieces on my to-do list, because there's so much that comes up when you're working or when you're testing things that you end up with more stuff than you thought, especially when it comes to AIs. There's so many variables, so many flags, and there's going to be more. I haven't even added them all yet because some of them I want to keep things limited until I get each part working. So I want to get the turning. I got turning to work. At least turning works, so it knows which direction to turn, and it's got a sight angle and a distance. Now the distance, I haven't included the distance check, but in the sight cone script here that's creating a cone, I want it to also check whether the player's within the range that the NPC can see, because as it stands right now, the NPC could be all the way over here, the player could be all the way out here somewhere, and the ship can still see whether it's in its line of sight. But we want to give it like a circular range, so that once the player's outside this line of sight, that it doesn't see it anymore. And currently that's being stored in this other variable called AI sight distance, and so all I'd really need to do, I believe, is add a check for that to the sight cone script, and that will be, it could be a condition or a comparison, but I'm going to use comparison just because it's more natural looking. But what we want to do is check to see if the actor distance, which is found under geometry, we want to see the distance between two actors on the main map. This is, you want it to check the map that the main player is on, and then we want it to check between the ID of, or scripting ID of this actor. This will refer to the NPC ship that's checking. And then the second actor is going to be an actor variable, which is stored in ship target, which is all the way down here. We also, that's what we're checking. We want to check the variable of this ship target, and we want to check to see what's stored there, and that's going to be the second actor. It's usually going to be the player or another NPC ship, but whatever's stored in ship target is actor 2, And actor 1 is going to be this actor. So we'll press enter. And we want to make sure that the distance between the ship's target and the ship is less than this ship's AI sight distance. So if the distance between the player and the ship is less than the sight distance, it will continue on. Check to make sure that the player is within the cone. And if it's not within distance, we'll say that it's outside the field of sight and it will return a 0. So I'll add some comments. Is the target ship within sight range? And is the target ship within the cone of sight? Target is within field of sight, will return a 1 for yes and a 0 for no. So now we can go back in here. This guy shouldn't be able to do anything until the player is 384 pixels or less away from it. So the range is going to be very small, probably around this area or so. And even if it's targeting the ship, that doesn't mean it can see me. So it's over there shooting at nothing. And I'll shoot it, which makes me its target. And since I'm not within range of it, it doesn't know what to do. I gotta fix the spinning part, but now that I'm in range, it sees me. But if I'm out of the range, it stops firing. And if I don't have that, it'll literally just keep firing no matter where I am on the map. So once you get 384 pixels away from you, or from the target, once it's 384 pixels away from its target, it'll start trying to attack. And it killed me. So I'm going to do some adjusting. The player's not going to die that quickly. There's going to be explosions. You know, we also want it to do if the player's outside of the sight cone, it's going to turn, but if it's inside the sight cone, we want it to stop and reset its turning direction. But something's not happening right. Obviously, I'm going to have to do a lot more tweaking on these because I'm incredibly new to making the behaviors of AI, but by default, I can set them up to move. There's going to be conditions that turn on moving, and the condition turn on moving will usually be it making its own decisions, whether it's going to patrol. If it's an enemy ship, it's going to spot the player and then go try and attack it, and that will turn on the movement. Right now I don't have any conditions to turn on moving, so he just sits over there shooting into the void until it's time. Oh no, I'm going to lose him. Yep. I'll actually put him closer to the player. I also have to set it up so that whenever the player is in visual range or another ship, it will have a variable to store whoever's in range of it, but it might have a different target already. No, get away! Come and get me! Oh no. That'll be a behavior I want to give it. Once you start doing damage to it, it should turn away and try to fly away from you. But that's the closest I've ever gotten to having reactive enemies. My old enemies would just fly around the map and they'd face the player immediately. There was no... It didn't take equipment into consideration. So whatever this is wearing on its turning thrusters is how fast it can turn. So you could increase the turning rate and everything and make it super fast, super agile. There will be different species equipment. Right now I'm only working on human equipment, the basic stuff. And then there will be alien weapons, there will be some alien weaponry. I've not gotten more than 2 viewers, but that's okay. Also, might as well toss this in for anyone who's watching. If you haven't been to ScreamingBrainStudios.com, go get all your free graphics covered by my Screaming Brain Studios project. Everything here is totally free and public domain, which means you have no restrictions. You don't have to credit me. You can use them any way you want in a commercial project, non-commercial. You can sell them, you can redistribute them, you can modify them, you can edit them. You can do anything you want. Please don't just re-upload and sell them. That's silly, but just know that you probably could if you wanted, because they're public domain, but everyone knows where they came from. So they're divided into different categories. There's board games stuff, dominoes, and poker sets. There's different isometric tile sets, enough to build whole maps and little cities, towns. And then there's game kits, animated stuff, a lot of interface graphics, and a whole butt ton of textures. You can also get tutorials for old school graphic techniques and a whole list of free tools. And almost everything on this list is free except for Photoshop A Sprite. Pretty much everything else is free, and anything that is paid, Bryce 7 I think is $20. It's a great program for making 3D landscapes and environments. It's been around for a long time. Everything else is free. GIMP, Image Magic is free. Noisy Boy Noiser, Spacescape, all of these are free. And then I've also got this list of all the abandoned tools that I use, so you can actually go through and see the software that I'm using behind the scenes that you can't get anymore. A lot of these were available, some even up until recently, like 2017. You could still buy the World Creator isometric rendering engine from their website in 2017 until they disappeared. I think the company went under. It's also Reproject Image, another small tool that I use for creating environment maps and stuff. But everything else, you might be able to find a demo download for some of these, but most of the websites are dead or have been dead for 10, 15 years or more. And in a lot of cases, the software that was available, some of them were free, like Wood Workshop used to be a free download, but it's unavailable now, so you can't get it. Stuff like MapZone used to be free. That existed before Substance Designer or Adobe Substance. It's very, very hard to find nowadays, but it's for creating textures, and there's also a few texture making programs. But everything in here is free. You can read about the project. You can check out any of my websites or social media pages, but everything there is free. You can also get it all on itch.io or Open Game Art. All the same stuff's there. So we'll go back to the project here. And now we've got this basic attack behavior. It's just starting to use its weapon whenever the player is within the sight cone. Now, I can add another check to make sure that the player is in a smaller cone and adjust accordingly, which would be a second version of sight cone. I'd probably make another one called attack cone. And that'll only happen if the player's within the sight cone. I'm trying to think of how I want to do this. I definitely don't need this duplicate anymore, so I'll save that. Really, basically I have the main cone, which is the line of sight. If the player falls within this range, it triggers that the ship can see you. I think the attack range should be I don't know if it should be about half that or a third that, because if it's half that, it'll still be a bit wide. If I make it about a third, whenever the player is within this range here, that it will start attacking. So it can become aware of the player, turn towards it, and then I'll see if I can fit a smaller angle in here. Because once the player is within this attack angle, that's kind of when I want it to attack. I don't want it just flinging bullets like when it's not completely pointed at the character or at the player. I also want it to do, there's going to be another condition here, I believe. It might be a while trigger that I need, because I'm going to be checking a condition of the actor variables. There's going to be an AI variable for attacking. I don't know if I've added that yet, but it'll say AI attacking, and in there will be the scripting for the actual attack, but I'm not sure how I'm going to do this yet. Some of this takes some pre-planning. I did do some notepad work, and a couple of my little math problems are still scattered around between some of these. Like, actually this is for parallax backgrounds. There is a way that I can rotate things to face the direction the ship is moving, so I can create some effects. Not sure how good they'll look, but yeah. Well, almost about an hour and a half. Don't have much more to cover right now. Definitely got a good amount of progress here with my NPC ships. They'll follow the player around, or they'll try and point at it. I haven't figured out properly following, which would be nice. I'd like them to be able to like come up behind the ship, stop at a certain distance, and then follow you. So if you're doing like an escort or something, I want ships that'll follow you, or even, I don't know if I'm going to have hiring escorts or not, but it would be nice to have ships that are pointing in the same direction as you, kind of going along with you. That's probably a long way down the road, but also going to see how much longer we're working in 001 Game Creator. Because over here we've got some news coming from software. About 7 or 8 years ago, there was a mention of a secret project from the company that makes 001 Game Creator. And only a few of us know what it is. Only a few of us have any idea what's coming. But it's been a long wait. The announcement this morning was the first public teaser is being released tomorrow, which means that very soon the secret project will be available, and there's a possibility that look at that messy desktop. You can ignore that. But there's a chance that I might continue working on this here for a little bit longer. We'll see. I can't give away anything quite yet. Once the teaser's announced, once the teaser's released tomorrow, I'll be able to talk about it more. But until then, we'll just have to wait and see what it is. But hopefully I'm not boring you guys too much with what little I'm able to actually show and get done each session. I've probably focused a lot on interfaces in the last few streams, which is something that a lot of people, there's a lot to cover with interfaces. Interface work is very heavy, very script heavy, but so is every other part of the game. So some people avoid interfaces and just focus on designing actor stuff. Some people work really heavily with sprites and the sprite sequencer to make fancy sprites and animations. But my specialty's always been interfaces, and I love working with them. They're a lot of fun to design, a lot of fun to get working. But that might be all for tonight. I'll probably jump back on in a few hours. I might get on, just do a little bit more of this. As always, I'm just hanging out at work, having a good time working on games. But anyway, thank you guys for watching these videos. Check out screeningbrainstudios.com. Check out 001gamecreator.com if you haven't yet. Site might be down tonight. They're working in the background. So you can definitely grab your own copy of this, follow along, make your own game, whatever. Or you just watch these and see what I have to show off. Eventually I'll get back into working some more with the graphics tools. I'd like to revamp the sun animations. There's some more planet stuff I want to try out. But until next time, I think that's it for right now. I'll see you guys in a few hours, and if I don't see you guys in a few hours, I'll see you tomorrow night about the same time. Thank you guys for popping in.